I take it you were having audio problems and whatnot?
Yep, but I think it's fixed now. Or can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you fine now. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
You can hear. I take it you can hear me all right.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
Okay.
So what do you want to discuss today, and how are we going to start it?
Well, I wanted to go back to what we were talking about before, where we were talking about basically just how Trump is the great Cheeto Donald Trump is screwing up our international relations. Um, so
Yeah. Well,
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 the
it's
thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
it's been interesting. So the U.S. has always been our ally, and it's just very difficult to see the changes to how an administration can just throw away years of alliances, but that's just how it is.
Well, it's definitely frustrating from the like. I'm somebody who voted for Kamala Harris because I knew that how badly he was going to screw up the country. Although the stuff about him like threatening to invade like Canada, Greenland, and Panama, that was he didn't show any signs that he was going to say that stuff until after he won the election. It's frustrating, but it's like there's not a whole lot that a lot of us can do about it. And one thing that I see a lot on the internet, especially in places like Reddit, is there are a lot of Europeans. You're self-accepted, but there's like a lot of Europeans that are like taking their anger out on Americans in general, even though like the MAGA crowd is only like maybe a third of the population, if even that much.
Yeah, but as I said, is one third voted for him, one third didn't care. They just didn't care. They couldn't be bothered, and he tried to start an insurrection. How can you not care? I just can't understand that.
See, I mean, yeah. Well, there are a lot of Americans who don't seem to care about it because it doesn't affect them. You got people that are just completely ignorant and they just don't even think to vote or whatnot. I mean, it's there's a lot going on, and I think a lot of it has to do with just how our political system works. Some people think that if it was illegal to not vote, like if we had compulsory voting, like what Uruguay has, that would fix the problem of people not voting. But that could have the way I look at it, that could potentially have consequences. There was a representative in the Democratic Party in Washington State. His name is Sam Hunt, and I think last year he tried proposing a bill to make it illegal to not vote because he was saying like he and some of his supporters were saying like, well, I think the reason why a lot of people aren't voting is because there's voter interference, voter intimidation. The police like prevent them from voting or whatever. The voter ID laws, and so the solution would be to make it illegal, make it a crime for those people to not vote. And the problem that I see down the line is okay, so what would stop like a police officer, like let's say you have a racist cop or whatever, and they want to stop somebody from voting, they could just find ways to prevent somebody from voting, and then they can say, "Up, you didn't vote. Looks like I got to arrest you." I mean, that's speculation, but it's like how would you go about legislating that?
I just think it's stupid to especially in the U.S. to propose compulsory voting, because voting in the U.S. is not federal. It's states who are facilitating the voting, and you can just see the votes, and I think it's Georgia where you might have one voting booth, not voting booth, but one polling place in a radius of 100 kilometers or something like that, in areas which are predominantly democratic, and then you have other places where you have small town Republican places where you have voting polls or voting areas uh, where it's just way easier to access. So if you make it compulsory to vote, you're just saying to the poor people that here's a fine because we're not making it easier for you to vote. We're just trying to hammer you by not vote because you're not voting because you're not able to uh, travel 100 kilometers for voting. You have work to get up to. You have families to provide for. It's just not that easy.
So basically, the only reason I brought up the whole compulsory voting controversy that happened last year is because Democrats were trying to find ways to get people to come out to vote, and the truth is that the Democratic Party for the past, I would say, 10 years has been having like an internal struggle. Like, I'm registered as a Republican, but I'm not like a MAGA type. I'm part of the Libertarian faction of the Republican Party, or at least I was. I've been ostracized a couple of years ago, so I might be changing my voter registration, but I haven't gotten around to it. Um, the in the Democratic Party side, over the past 10 years, there's been a struggle between two major factions of the Democratic Party. You've got, we mentioned this when we were talking about this on Reddit. One faction is like the Clintonian third way establishment, I guess centrist faction, although by European standards they would probably be considered center right. And then you've got the progressive faction, which you got your left liberals, you got your progressives, you got social democrats, and the Clintonian faction is doing everything in their power to stop the progressives, and the progressives, they opt to stay in the Democratic Party instead of forming their own party. And the thing is, it is a solid argument that you could make that it's like, well, if they tried forming a third party, then the system would really screw them over. But the thing is that they've been trying to do this for the past 10 years. The centrist Clintonian faction has been beating them at every turn. It's like they've got the money, they got the donors, they've got the institutions are on the side of the Clintonian Democrats. So it's like you've been trying the same strategy for 10 years and it hasn't been working out for you. Maybe it's time to just try something different. And I could be wrong about that, but even though we have an embedded two-party system where it's almost like we're a one-party state but with two political parties instead of one, there have been a few cases where, independent candidates or third-party candidates did win elections. One example that comes to mind specifically is there was a former Democrat by the name of Joe Lieberman who was running for a Senate election in the state of Connecticut. Now, he was a longtime senator running in the Democratic Party, but then one election he lost a primary to somebody else in the Democratic Party. So he lost his primary. He left the Democratic Party and he formed his own political party. I think he was officially a Democrat. No, he was officially an independent, but he created his own political party called Connecticut for Lieberman. So it was a party like centered around him. And he ran in the general election and he won because he had the name recognition that his opponents didn't have. The Republican did so bad in that election that he wasn't even like on the Wikipedia page at all. Like, it just shows Democrat and Joe Lieberman, and it shows all the counties that they won. The Republican won 0.
Yeah, okay. Well, Lieberman wasn't he vice presidential candidate or something like that a few years back? I think the name does ring a bell, but I can't really find where to put him. But the problem, as I see it, with a third party candidate is that your political system is so infected by money that in order to win an election in this day and age, you need so damn much money to get your messages out in order to be in the minds of the voters. So Lieberman can get elected because he has this name recognition. If he didn't have the name recognition, it would be far more difficult for him. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, uh, the lobbying problem and like the money in politics is certainly a problem. I would say that lobbying is basically just a legal form of bribery. I guess corruption is okay when the United States does it, but obviously being sarcastic. Um, but I think in the case of Joe Lieberman, like it was not just that he had some money behind him, but he had a lot of name recognition. Like everybody in Connecticut knew who he was. People outside of Connecticut knew who he was. He had a very long and well-known political career. Now, back in 1999 to 2000, like you're sort of right, Joe Lieberman was the vice president. He was the candidate for vice president in 2000. The presidential candidate for the Democratic Party was Al Gore, and that was a very well-known presidential election. Not just because it was the first election that made George W. Bush the president, but George W. Bush didn't win the popular vote. Al Gore did, and there's a lot of speculation that Jeb Bush, who's George W. Bush's younger brother, that Florida under his watch engaged in a lot of voter irregularities. Like they had the voter rolls set up in such a way that somebody might be trying to vote Democrat and then might have ended up voting Reform Party instead. Fun fact: Donald Trump actually ran for president under the Reform Party ticket, but he lost the primary to a guy named Pat Buchanan. And at the time, Trump denounced Pat Buchanan as being a Hitler lover. And I'm thinking, like, boy, the times have changed.
yeah, true that's. But in all fairness, I actually don't believe that he's a Hitler lover, Trump. He's a Trump lover. He loves himself, and he wants to do everything in order to gain as much power and money for himself. Himself. It's not really about values.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, a lot of people think that this like Trump MAGA movement over the past 10 years is like Republicans suddenly being unprincipally supportive of whoever the Republican guy is. But I've been paying attention to politics since 2012, since I was in high school, I was in high school at the time, and I had like seen a lot of stuff. Republicans, there's always been an extreme faction of the Republican Party that's always been very unprincipled. They were like that back during the Bush years, where it's like there were people that were part of like right wing or even libertarian think tanks that would get kicked out for criticizing the Bush administration, even if their reasons for criticizing the Bush administration was consistent with like right wing right wing values or whatever. And it just doesn't feel like things have changed that much in that regard, because there is a website, a very extremely right wing website called Conservapedia. They were very unprincipled and deceitful even back in the 2000s when it was the Bush administration. It's just that they just swapped George W. Bush with Donald Trump as their version of Jesus, I guess. It's just the people change, but the behaviors don't. As for Donald Trump being ruining our foreign policy, basically sucking Putin's dick, it seems I was under the impression that Donald Trump was a Manchurian candidate. I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of that movie. Well, it was originally a book, but there was a book called the Manchurian.
I know about it. Yeah. So well, I think I don't think he's a Manchurian candidate, or at least I don't think he has to be. He does what a Manchurian candidate would do, but I don't think he is in a position now where uh, Putin wouldn't have any leverage. So if Putin had, let's talk about this video or anything like that. They've talked about the golden showers and so on. If he had those things, it wouldn't really matter for Trump anymore because he has all the power. His his supporters love him for who he is, and he can just tell everybody that it's a fake. It's fake. It's fake news. It's been generated. Nobody can trust what Putin says. So I don't think he does it because he's a Manchurian candidate. He loves Putin because Putin has the power. He's awed by people in powerful positions, and that's why he also wants to achieve that himself. Or at least that's what I think.
I mean, like, so the leverage that Putin has over Trump. I mean, I haven't really done a whole lot of research on this, but I do know that Trump has businesses in Russia, and he didn't want. I guess he didn't want those to be threatened. But Trump is also a kind of guy who likes to slap the knobs of dictators, and he admires the fact that Putin is a dictatorial strongman. He admires Kim Jong Un, but the interesting thing is maybe I am wrong about this. Maybe I haven't really done my research, but he doesn't seem to feel the same way towards the Ayatollah in Iran. I mean, I'd have to go and like look it up, but it's just like I've never heard him slob the knob of the Ayatollah in Iran or Xi Jinping of the People's Republic of China. I think he probably does to a degree admire Xi Jinping, but he seems to, at least in his rhetoric, he's more opposed to the People's Republic of China. But the thing is that if he really wanted to stop the People's Republic of China, he would make a bigger deal out of protecting Taiwan, because that's the thing that he's talking about doing right now, is threatening Taiwan. Well, that's the thing that the PRC is threatening to do. As for Russia, the interesting thing is I had heard that, like, back in his first administration, I don't know how true this is. People were saying that in his first administration that he was actually pretty tough on Russia, and that now he's seeming to do a 180.
So if we start with China, he has said that he admires Xi Jinping. He's very tough. He's very very nice and very tough. You know the rhetoric. But in regards to Russia and Iran, he likes the strongman character. The Ayatollah in Iran is not that public a figure. He's more like a man behind the curtain, and then you have the president of the Iranian Republic being the front figure. So in terms of policies, he's trying to make an Iran deal today. That's why they're trying to hold back on Israel attacking Iran. It's it's a deal which will look like the deal Obama made, but the policies have changed dramatically from Trump 1 to Trump 2, first term, second term, uh, because he does not have the same people in the same positions. The neocons have vanished from positions of power in the Trump administration. Now you have sycophants in all the positions. So tough on China. Perhaps he was it in the first administration, but that was due to the people who he had in the important positions of policy making.
I mean, is this still okay? I didn't know if my microphone was still picking up my voice. So when it comes to the People's Republic of China, like when it comes to the whole tariffs thing, there are certain countries that I agree putting tariffs on, like the People's Republic of China. We should not be funding their ability to invade countries or threaten countries. Because by doing business, either doing business in China or doing business with China, we're actually like an accomplice to them threatening other countries. We're an accomplice to helping build up their economy and threaten countries like Taiwan. And some people are like, "Oh yeah, well, I bet you have something in your house that was made in China. I bet you are financial. You know, a lot of your industries are dependent on stuff made in China." It's like, yeah, I've got like my coffee mug here was made in China, but this is something that I can make here in the United States. I just need some whatever material, clay or whatever to make ceramic, and I could just make it. I could literally just make it myself. Like a lot of the stuff that we get from China is cheap crap, and I used to work in retail. So a lot of the stuff that was like that had the made in China label was flimsy garbage that was poorly made. And it's not me saying that the Chinese can't make good stuff, but you'd have businesses or corporations, they would make their stuff as cheaply as possible. They want to pay people as little as possible. American companies, of course. And so they have it done in the People's Republic of China so that way they could circumvent, American labor laws. Like maybe our labor laws aren't like perfect. They're not as good as like Europe's, but that's still too much for a lot of these greedy corporations here in the United States. So they have this stuff made in the People's Republic of China where they could cut all the corners they want. They could pay people as little as possible because the People's Republic of China, they value exploiting capitalism more than they value the well-being of their own citizens. And so the stuff is made in China and then it gets sold in the United States. And because people will vote with their wallets, of course places like Walmart are going to kill local businesses. So putting tariffs on China and make doing business with or in China, the PRC specifically, that I do support because we shouldn't be doing business with our geopolitical enemies in the first place. I despise Trump, but it frustrates me that it took Trump to actually get started doing something about it. Because Biden in the past was very supportive of doing business with the PRC, even though back in the 2000s, the People's Republic of China were spying on us. They had been doing espionage where they would send like students and people over to this country. They would infiltrate our corporations. They would infiltrate our institutions of learning and compromise them to serve the interests of the PRC. I think a few years ago, Xi Jinping did like a visit in San Francisco or something, and there were Americans who were protesting against it. The People's Republic of China had their people like attack American protesters, and it's like, is our government just like not doing anything about it? Do we just not have security in this country? So even though I really despise Trump putting tariffs on every country, including our allies, in the case of the People's Republic of China, I do support the tariffs because we shouldn't be giving them our business in the first place. Especially considering that anytime we have technology made in China or having been having any parts built in the People's Republic of China. They actually put recording devices in that technology, and our government had to crack down on our defense contractors because some of them were apparently having stuff like electronics made in China. One time I think they either took one apart or one broke, and they found a recording device in it. So it's like, yeah, we shouldn't be. There's two reasons why we shouldn't be doing business with the PRC. So my opinion on all that's a little bit mixed.
Yeah. There are a few things to pick apart here. In regards to China, tariffs can be good if done correctly, because you want to trade with China on goods that are not important to you. So you shouldn't trade with China in regards to security products, products you need in order to manufacture defense or technology resources or anything like that. You should try to limit their power in those areas, but why not trade with China in the areas of, I mean, plastic products or something like that? If the products are as good as yours, because they can manufacture a lot cheaper than you can, and the workers which would have made the items, you can use them in other jobs and instead in higher earning jobs instead of using them for uh, in a production where you are just building the last pieces on an I don't know, an iPhone or something like that. You really don't need your own citizens to have those low paying jobs, as long as they are not a security risk to your country. In regards to tariffs in general, I was going to write to you about the tariffs, because tariffs can be a good thing if they are done in a good way. So you see China as a security risk, which it is. It would have been much smarter to take an approach to China where you had cooperated with your allies, so you could have put tariffs on in a mutual attack on China. But now it's all all up in the air, and I don't see you winning a trade war with China when you pissed off the rest of the world in regards to trade.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. The problem is that, like, American presidents in the past were either corrupt or stupid, and American corporations are not exactly patriots. They don't have the West's best interests at heart. They only care about short-term financial gain. Basically, like, if you have like robber barons running the companies that Americans depend on. Now, I mean, my phone, I try to avoid buying a phone that was made in China. It's a Samsung. It says made in Vietnam, although there was a British guy who made a documentary where he explained that a lot of products that say made in Vietnam, it's like, oh yeah, they'll make 90% of it in China, and then like the other 10%'s made in Vietnam, and I'm like, ah, fuck. I'm really hoping the PRC's not spying on me, but because I know that they are very vicious against anyone who dares to speak against dear leader Xi Jinping. But anyway, so if the people that were running the United States and our corporations were smart, they would have focused on doing more business with Western countries or countries that share our political goals, or at least in the past, what our political goals apparently were, versus having business done in countries that are opposed to our geopolitical interests. I think the reason why they didn't have them done in European countries is because they have like higher standards on how they treat their own employees and whatnot, and corporate American corporations and our government by extension want to pay the least amount of money and maximize profit in return. So the People's Republic of China is, hey, we undervalue our own currency and we treat our employees like garbage. You can just have it done in our country. Although with the People's Republic of China, doing business with them has actually been something that was going on since the Cold War, because Richard Nixon wanted to drive a wedge between the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union. I don't think that really worked that much, because when it came to geopolitics, yes, when the United States was out of the equation, China and the Soviet Union went at each other like cats and dogs. But anytime there was a conflict like Vietnam, the Chinese and the Soviets would take the same side against the United States. So I don't think it was really worth selling our soul in the long run. As for the 2000s to now, it seems to me that, I mean, you do have products made in countries like South Korea and Japan, but people in the United States, like not everybody, but a lot of people, like to buy the cheapest stuff. They'll look at the price tag and say, "Oh, I'm going to buy this thing from Walmart because it's cheaper." And it's made in China, so they're indirectly supporting a country that's opposed to us. And the people running our government, Bush, Obama, they didn't seem to really oppose that when I feel that they should have. Because the People's Republic of China was pulling stunts even back in the 2000s. They would influence businesses. Well, this is not a huge example, but one thing that does come to mind, if you want me to get specific, was there was a movie that came out, I think in the 2000s, or maybe it was around in the 2010s, called Red Dawn. And it was like a communist country was going to invade Washington State, which is on the west coast of the United States. In the original script, the invading country was supposed to be the People's Republic of China. The People's Republic of China catches wind of it, and they were like, okay, we're going to boycott the movie. And then MGM, which is the studio that was behind the movie, they tucked their tail in between their legs and then changed the enemy from the People's Republic of China to North Korea. And the People's Republic of China is, well, as long as it's not us, we don't care about throwing North Korea under the bus. And that's an example. That's just, I mean, there's more examples of economic coercion that the People's Republic of China uses against the United States, but that's like one example. I do agree that we should have gotten our act together a long time ago, and we didn't. I think that the United States should have been preparing to make ourselves either more self-reliant or reliant on countries that are friendly to our geopolitical interests a long time ago. And I think that we didn't, because the people running the country that I live in are complete idiots.
China China is a competitor for us today, and I think in your discussion, the problem I hear is you talk about corporations not being, I think you said, patriotic, or having the geopolitical picture in mind. But in reality, that shouldn't be their focus. Their focus should be on following the rules. They should be. They should not try to uh, uh, go against any of the rules that have been set or against sanctions. But after that, it's up to the US government to make laws which guides the companies. If the US does not want big American companies to trade with China on things of national security or technology, AI or whatever. That should be the US Congress making laws suppressing the the companies from doing what they want to do, and that is making money.
I mean, I'm not like I am a capitalist, a free market capitalist generally speaking, but I also think that like yeah, they do want to make money, but I do think that we should have like limits on just what kind of things they can do to. Well, I guess I don't know what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is that yeah, Congress and the people in our various branches of government should be doing something to try to curtail that problem. But a lot of companies and corporations have a lot of lobbying power, which basically means they can, if they were, if the politicians in question are financially on the hook to certain financial interests, if some of these corporations are have them under their control, then they will just do the bidding of whatever those corporations want. And if those corporations want them to not threaten their business with China, then they will basically, those politicians are going to be corrupted. Like, I haven't really done my research on this, but I do know that lobbying has a lot of power in the United States, and it's basically legal bribery.
It is. It is. It's true. But that's how your country is. It's it's a kleptocracy where big companies steal from the ordinary citizens. They steal power, they steal money, they steal everything, in order to enrich themselves. And you, as citizens, are the only ones who can demand change in that perspective. So they can be a national security risk if you do not um, try to rein them in. But that's the power of the U.S. government, and it is them who should be doing something in order to protect your security.
Well, yeah, and one element of this has got to do with the whole thing with back in I think it was late February when uh, Luigi Mangione is accused of assassinating Brian Thompson, but it seemed like that was the only thing that got this one healthcare company to stop its rollout of a plan to deny coverage to like people with pre-existing conditions or something. And basically, what that whole debacle demonstrated is that corporations and maybe even the government to an extent only respects violence. It's like they were going to deny coverage to citizens, and begging them to stop doesn't seem to elicit a response out of these powerful corporations other than amusement. So then you have some guy gun down the CEO of a company who not where that company not that insurance company, I think it was United Healthcare. Not only did they have the highest level of health insurance denial, the highest rate of health insurance denial, but it was partially because Brian Thompson himself was responsible for creating an algorithm in their system to deny people coverage. And after Brian Thompson got assassinated, there was another health insurance company that was right about to roll out a plan to deny a lot of people coverage, and then as a response to that the assassination, they scrapped that plan. And all that's really demonstrating is if you want to stop corruption, you want to stop like this kind of abuse of the citizenry, you got to start assassinating people. It's like all what kind of message is that sending? And a lot of I see people say like, oh well, what you need is a revolution. What you need to do is overthrow the kind of people in power. A lot of Americans are terrified of the federal government. The federal government is about to, you know how back in the Middle Ages in Europe, like people who committed high treason would be drawn and quartered. They would be made an example of. That's basically what the federal government is doing to Luigi Mangione because of what he stands for and the way people see him. Like they're perfectly okay with petty criminals hurting poor people because, well, that's not happening to them. So they're about to have. They were trotting out Luigi Mangione as this terrible person that they were going to make an example of. So the people that actually run the United States are very corrupt, and the mayor of New York City was like walking alongside all the cops and everything, doing a photo op, even though he's got quite a few corruption scandals he was involved in, and I don't know, because it's kind of like with Russians being afraid to have a revolution against Putin. A lot of people, there are a lot of Russians that absolutely despise Putin, but it's a similar deal where they are terrified to stand up to their government because of the violent consequences. Like, the Russian government is very brutal, and the American federal government is very powerful. The American federal government has drones and whatnot. They've got a very powerful police force. They've got we have surveillance. We practically do have a surveillance state. I mean, it's how they found Luigi Mangione so fast. A lot of speculation is that there was nobody that ratted him out. It was actually just that the government has access to surveillance that they don't want the average person to know about. The thing is I forgot what I was going to say for a second.
Yeah, okay. Well, the politicizing of the case is the worst thing about it, I think, because politicians shouldn't really do anything to comment on cases which have not gone to court yet. He's an innocent man until he's not an innocent man in a court of justice.
That's exactly.
So that's how it should be. And I don't know the American legal system, but I would think that it endangers the case against him, that he might not get a fair trial. So if he's found guilty, I think you could argue that, and he has a manifest. If he has a manifest and he is found guilty, I think you could argue that it is domestic terrorism, because it's a political agenda which you're using to kill. And I'm not saying he's guilty. I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence, so I'll let the justice system do their thing. In regards to the healthcare system, yeah, it's quite fucked as United Healthcare, but I think you'll find that perhaps they've stopped the algorithm for now, but they will start the algorithm again at some point. So he might, if he's guilty, he might have won a short victory, but it will all come back to them wanting to get more money, more profit from their customers. So it's very difficult, and again, it's because your system, your healthcare system, is broken to the core. It's not a problem that you have a private healthcare system. The problem is that these companies do not have fair competition. If you had fair competition between healthcare providers, it would be much more fair. In 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 reality, your healthcare is much more expensive than my healthcare. You use vast amounts of money which are not used directly in the healthcare system, but are used in order to pay these social, no, not social security, insurance companies to enrich them and their investors instead of providing healthcare to the ordinary citizen.
Well, I think that there's more to it than just competition. One thing that you did mention earlier is that Luigi Mangione is guilty. Like, he's innocent until proven guilty, and that's not the approach that the government is taking. I do remember seeing like his attorney say a few things about all this. Is her one of her first arguments is that, by doing that, the government doing that photo op where they have like a bazillion cops and a bunch of government officials like escorting Luigi Mangione, all chained up. It's like you're already convicting him guilty before he's even had a free and fair trial. But the thing is that like yeah, if our government wasn't corrupt, they wouldn't do that. But I kind of I don't know what you think, but my perspective of my own government is we're basically like a third world country with a bunch of gold chains. We're 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 a third world country with a Gucci belt, and it is interesting to talk to people outside the United States because it's like I've never had the opportunity to set foot outside the United States, so I don't really have like that many perspectives. I mean, I do know that things are worse in some other countries like Mexico, where they some of the problems that we have in the United States, it's like cranked up to 11 with cartel violence being very commonplace there. There's entire like sectors of the country you can't walk around in without getting shot or something, or whatever. But at the same time, we're nowhere close to having a ideal quality of life with this sort of shit going on. As for the case with Luigi Mangione and the healthcare problem, it's not just a lack of competition. It's these companies. It doesn't seem like any of them are really interested in actually like using their healthcare to help people as much as it is maximizing profit. And then you got the companies that make medicine. The cost of medicine is going up because the demand is never going to go down. It's like, do you want to live or do you want to die? Oh, there's some old people that would rather live instead of die. Okay, well, what's your life worth to you? Okay, we're going to charge out the nose for medicine. And back in 2020, Joe Biden, one thing that he ran on for president was a public option. And then once he becomes president, he's like, oh yeah, remember that public option where the government was going to get involved and trying to deal with the healthcare problem? Yeah, I'm going to take it away now that I've won the presidency, now that I don't have to worry about winning an election anymore. And that's a constant problem that we're dealing with, is that the Republicans are like, yeah, if you are infirm, you deserve to die. And on the Democrats' side, it's like, oh yeah, we'll get you that public option. And then when they win the election, they're like, psych.
But is the truth not that it's so damn difficult to create institutions or policies in the US? It's very difficult because you need 60 votes and in the Senate. So it's very easy to break the system because you can just stop funding. You don't need a majority to stop funding. You just need to have enough to stop a majority from giving the funding needed to keep the institutions or the policies in place. So as long as you have the 60 vote rule in the Senate, you you will not be able to create any policies if you have an obstruction and a party which is trying to obstruct every reasonable policy in regards to healthcare or gun violence or anything else in that regard. It's it's quite it's really good to have the 60 vote rule if you had two adult parties which were interested in the best solution for their common American citizen. But that's not how it is. The Republican Party, as I understand it, is that they spent a lot of time in opposition uh, trying to say, oh, the system is so bad, healthcare doesn't work, and these other institutions does not work, and then they get into government, and then they break the shit out of the institutions and the policies. And when the Democrats get into to office again, they just sit there and say, "See what I said? So what we said? It's broken. It's the Democrats can't see it's broken. Well, you damn broke it yourself."
Yeah, well, so with the healthcare system, I mean, I will admit I haven't done as much reading and research into this as I probably should have. But from what I've seen, it seems like with the Republican Party, a lot of people in the Republican Party are fucking demons, man. They are like, yeah, if you need healthcare, if you can't afford it, you deserve to die. They might not directly say that, but that's basically their attitude. And I used to
We are
be
all going to die. We are all going to die
well.
at some point.
It basically is like
What a fucking moron!
like like
What a fucking moron!
well, I mean, like I used to so I used to be in local politics, and I was in local politics in the Republican Party, but I wasn't like I my reasoning for it wasn't really like I'm not like a Reaganite. It's more like the Democratic Party on certain things was more opposed to me, and the Republican Party seemed to be more like a more like a moderate libertarian party in the state that I live in. So I joined the Republican Party, and I saw a lot of like ridiculous shit. I was in private group chats, and the general attitude that a lot of Republicans have is, yeah, if you need, like, if you are infirm, if you are obese, if you have, whatever medical problems, and if you make less than a six-figure salary, you deserve to die. And they have this like hyper Darwinist attitude that I just found very repulsive. So when they eventually did kick me out for not being right wing enough, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not really sad about this. I should have left a long time ago. But the Democrats, again, they have two factions. The progressives do want to fix the healthcare system. I don't know if they can seem to agree on what the best course of action to get to that point is. And in the Clintonian faction, they seem to either be similar to the Republicans in their attitude, or either that, or they just don't care about it. So they don't really fight as hard for a functional healthcare system as they do just stopping progressives from getting anything done. And it might sound strange for me to say that as somebody who has somewhat right-wing politics on certain issues. I consider myself to be, if not a moderate or a centrist. Not that I'm trying to be like as middle of the road as possible. It's just that my politics are kind of like all over the place depending on what issue we're talking about. And the Clintonian faction rules the Democratic Party, and they kind of just don't give a shit about healthcare. So it's a real mess. And well, yeah, I don't know what else to say about it.
And I'll just say that the moron I was referring to is Junior Ernst, of course. Um, but like I said, as I understand your system, it's really difficult to make any change if you're not ready to break the filibuster. If you are going to break the filibuster rule, you will also have the other party being able to complete or do policies with just 50 votes in the Senate. So it's I think I think the Democratic Party must decide for themselves that in order to convince the ordinary American citizen that they are doing something, they must remove the filibuster rule. They must simply remove it. Because if you get a majority in the Senate, in both chambers of Congress, in the House and the Senate, and you also have the presidency, it's very difficult to um, to explain to ordinary American citizens that you are in power, but in reality you're not able to uh, uh, make any changes because you need more seats than just a majority. It's very difficult to explain to people, so they get angry and frustrated that you're not able to complete any policies. And the Democrats are doing everything by the books, while the Republican Party, as I see it, are willing to use the leverage that they get in governments, and they are willing to break norms in order to enhance their own uh, ideological positions. And again, it's way easier to remove policies or not funding policies than this to start up new policies or new institutions. So they have a great um, advantage that it's easier to point to something not being done than saying we are really trying to get something done, but they are obstructing. Yeah, but you have a majority. Why are you not doing anything? It's a conundrum which is difficult for them for the Democrats. Uh, the Democrats must change positions on some things like cultural issues, and they also have to keep in mind the progressive wing thinks that uh, progressive policies are they are the best for everyone. It's why can you hate being for everyone having freedom to express themselves and freedom to be who they are, love who they are, freedom to have healthcare and so on and so on. But what they do not think about is that they try to represent the American worker, but the worker, at least in Europe, at least in Denmark, the worker is for social policies, economic policies, which are center left, but they are quite conservative when it comes to cultural issues. It's not like they are against, in Denmark at least, gay marriages and so on and so on. It's when it's not simple, and you have to explain something in details in order to make an argument. Well, then you've lost them. You've lost what's important to them. What's important to an American worker is that they are being respected, that they have food on the table, that they are safe. That's what's important. Their family is safe. They are safe.
So there's a lot that I want to address. The first thing I would like to say is I figured out what was causing the echoing problem. Uh,
Yeah.
apparently it was my fault. Like my headphones weren't plugged in all the way, so it's like it caused an echoing problem. And while you were talking, I was reaching to get a nail clipper. I was gonna trim my nails, and it yanked the cord, and then it made your voice sound clear. I'm sorry. I'm an American. Excuse me. I'm anyway. So there's a lot that you said that I wanted to address.
Hmm.
There is a big problem in the United States when it comes to disunity amongst like the working class. Because I've worked a bunch of different blue collar jobs. There are a lot of blue collar workers in the United States who I mean, are there some that have their own economic interests at heart? Yes, but a lot of them have bought into the notion that if they just screw over their fellow person, that they will become the next Andrew Carnegie or whatever. Like, a lot of I can't tell you how many sycophants that I've run into in working blue collar jobs, and some people say that it's more of a problem in work environments that are not unionized, but even in jobs where that I've worked where I was a member of the union and they were members of unions, you still had people that were really just in it for themselves and didn't care how many other like workers that they had to screw over in order to climb their way to the top. And it's individualism is not completely bad, but that's an element of American individualism gone bad. And I mean, there is a lot of people in the working class in the United States that are socially conservative. Just like from what you tell, that's another thing. That's something that goes on in Europe as well. I think part of the reason for it is that social liberalism tends to be associated with like people that are doing better economically and people that are socially conservative. Like social conservatism tends to be associated with like I don't want to say lower classes, but I guess that's basically what I'm saying. Even though like these issues really apply to people of all different walks of life, it seems like uh, the people that have this right wing socially conservative mentality tend to be, in my experience, like white trash. It's very common. I don't want to say white trash, but in some cases, like that was kind of my personal experience, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but that seems. I'm speaking from experience because I worked a bunch of blue collar jobs and I saw a lot of that.
So, I think I know you don't want to use the term white trash. I think it's perhaps I know that the people you're talking about, but perhaps they are what they are because the system have failed them. The system should have done something to make their lives better. They should have felt they should have felt the governments and the country. when it's doing better, they should be doing better themselves. And their anger, their anger will be focused on some kind of enemy. It's easier to find a single enemy point that you can blame. So it might be foreigners or something like that, and then they will be seen as it's because they are narrow-minded. But perhaps they are what they are because they've not been taken serious, and the system should have done something to make them feel better. So I know it's. I'm not trying to apologize for narrow-minded people. I'm just saying it's systemic. It's a systemic problem which you have to find the root of the problem in order to fix. It's not just that voting class voting class voters are
Progressive?
angry. Yeah, they're not progressives, but they're
No,
not
no.
just angry
What
at foreigners. They are angry at the whole system, and they're not angry at the system in the way that progressives are. They're angry at the unfairness of it all and not being understood. And they are not being understood by those who claim to understand them either. Because if you have to buy into the progressive ideas, many times you have to buy into the whole progressive idea or the whole social liberal idea, which is just not for those who struggle to make the day and have enough to eat and enough to feel secure.
I did not say progressive. I said regressive, as in reaction.
Sorry. Yeah, a huge difference.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that it's like that they were born with like a demon gene that turns them into demons. Like I can recognize that they are how they are because something made them that way. It's not like, oh, like these people are just genetically inferior. Obviously, like even people that I dislike. Like I had a coworker of mine who was like a violent criminal. I actually mentioned him when we were talking via Reddit. But I also recognize that
Stealing.
he grew up in an incredibly dangerous city, and the adult figures that he grew up around were all like either violent criminals or something close to it. So it's like and so by the time he's an adult, that's what he values is just violence and taking advantage of people. I do think that our education system is to blame, even like including the public education system. I remember there was a YouTuber named Vosh, and like I used to watch his videos. He covered like a textbook that was actually like it was like a history textbook that shows like what they were teaching to kids in public schools, and it was like loaded down with all kinds of propaganda. The problem is that our education system is very flawed, and the politicians in power like keeping it that way. Um, and some people in European countries oppose the option of homeschooling because, like, a lot of the time in the United States, it's abused by religious fundamentalists to raise their kids to be uh, Christian fundamentalists, or it's used to abuse them. But the problem that I see is sometimes you have rotten school systems. I mean, a lot of the time you have rotten school systems. And I think that if you have a parent that genuinely cares about their kid, they should be allowed to raise them in a non-hostile environment, like autistic children, kids who have special needs. Like what public schools in the United States do is they will take children who have special needs, vulnerable children, and they will take children who have like conduct disorder children who are sociopathic or have criminal behavior, and they will put them in the exact same environment. They'll say, "Oh yeah, you're not doing well in school. We don't care what the reason is. We're just gonna throw you all together," and that puts vulnerable children in danger. And the people that run the schools, the politicians, they don't give a shit. Like, if it's not affecting their pockets getting lined, then they just don't care. And that's the reason why I think that homeschooling should be allowed in order to protect vulnerable children. And some people will say, "Oh, well, the solution is just get the politicians to put a stop to that, to just put a stop to the problems in public schools." The politicians are fucking corrupt. They don't give a shit. So the best thing that we can really do is just for the citizens to circumvent it the best they can. Ideally, we would throw these shit politicians out of office, but in my time in local politics, I saw a lot of election fraud. I saw a lot of voter intimidation because of goons that were paid off by politicians or goons that were associated with politicians engaging in very sketchy, illegal shit. So I think that for the time being, instead of banning things like homeschooling, we should use it as a counter to problems that happen in public schools until these problems in public schools are fixed. And this actually also kind of veers into the whole thing with like the right to bear arms and gun violence and shit. Like, I know that I'm like crossing into topics, and I'm probably gonna make things more confusing with a gish gallop. I don't mean a gish gallop, so I'll get to that after letting you respond to what I'm talking about in the education system. I have a bad habit of going off on tangents. I'm trying to be better about that. But as far as the education system, I do accept that a lot of people in the working class and a lot of people out in states that typically vote Republican, all the states that are shaped as rectangles. Like, there has been a bunch of interviewing a lot of the people living in those states why they voted for Trump, and they basically, it's all vibes. They just like the how edgy Trump is, and I'm like, we are so fucked if these are the people that are going to be choosing who's going to be running the country.
So in regards to education, I was appalled when I read that your teachers had opinions. I just can't. They had political opinions which they used in a class setting. I can't. I really can't understand that. You wrote it on Reddit
Yeah.
that they said that Obama wasn't at fault for anything. That he was some kind of messiah. I mean, you didn't write that, but he couldn't do anything wrong, and the opponents were wrong in all sense of the word. I can you explain that a bit, because it's new to me that teachers are at least are using party politics in a class setting. I really can't understand that.
So yeah. So in the United States, suppose I don't. So the particular teacher I was referring to was actually a college professor. She was like a speech professor, and she was just like, just glazing Obama nonstop. And it's like, and I didn't agree with her, but like I kind of got shouted down, and it's like I didn't want to get kicked out of the class, so I just kind of sucked it up. But yeah, a lot of like teachers in schools and professors in college, a lot of them are not neutral. I did have one professor who did occasionally talk about, well, I mean, the subject matter was kind of political, but like thankfully she herself was not at all political, and ironically it was my sociology professor that I had back when I was in community college back in 2016. But I have had a lot of teachers and professors that like to abuse they have outspoken political opinions, which is like, okay, you have your opinion, but in some cases you have teachers that abuse their power to assert their not necessarily political beliefs. That they will abuse their power to assert their beliefs in the classroom. I I had I had one teacher in high school. I don't remember if he was my science teacher, or I think he was either a science teacher or a history teacher. And we were having a conversation at some point about like life on Mars, and he's saying like Earth is the only planet in the entire galaxy that has any life in it. And I was like, and I at some point mentioned, well, you know, on Mars they did find like microscopic bacteria, so technically there's life on Mars. And he's like, no, there isn't. And so he got like three other students to gang up on me to try to like triangulate against me to say, no, there's no life on Mars. And I'm like, the evidence is out there. I've seen the pictures that NASA took, etc. And then finally, my teacher, he's like, if you continue to express that opinion, I'm gonna give you like a month's worth of detention. True story.
It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
And that's
I really can't understand that.
okay.
Why does he want to be right? I
Because
could understand. I could understand that if you were interrupting class
I
or
wasn't.
something like that. But if it's a discussion and you just do not agree, well, whoopsie do.
Like,
That's life.
well, if you want me to answer that question, a lot of teachers are like some of the biggest they're the biggest like narcissistic control freaks you could imagine. Like American teachers, not all of them, but it's a position of power that attracts people who want to have power over other people, especially children, because they're easier to intimidate and mold the opinions of. And American teachers and even professors get frustrated when you have students that think for themselves. They don't want you thinking for yourself. They want to have the ego boost rush of having power over other people. Not every teacher is like that. I've had decent teachers, but it's a position of power in the United States that attracts those people. And again, a lot of government officials just don't really care that this is a problem.
But well, you're not saying their first name, right? We always using the first name with teachers.
We don't.
It's perhaps where the position comes from, that they are more than just their first name. They are a position of power or authority in the classroom, and that's not really how it is perceived in Denmark, at least. I know it might be different in other European countries.
I mean, yeah. So for what you were asking, yeah, like it's not just that it's a formality that you refer to them by their last name. Like you actually, like I'm pretty sure it's like usually school policy and policy in universities that you have to address them as Mr. or Miss, Mrs. or Miss, whatever their last name is. Or the interesting thing is like in like media, like in SpongeBob, like if you have your employer, you have to do the same thing. Though in my experience, like every job I've ever worked at, you just call your boss by their first name, and because it would like they would feel weird if you called them by their surname, like Mr. or Mrs. But in like a school setting, you don't really have a choice. You have to, otherwise you'll get in trouble, and the school or college administrations will just take the side of whatever teacher or professor. So, like yeah, like apparently in Europe they don't have that like hyper fixation and value over hierarchy for its own sake. In the United States, in schools here, they value hierarchy for its own sake, and they encourage, you know, ranking people based on like what position of power in society and what rank you have, which is kind of antithetical to the very like concept that the United States was founded on. But there have always been people trying to undo the United States from the inside. Um, uh, so like in school, like ideally, like you don't want kids who are gonna be disruptive in class and shit, but it's also, you don't want to have the opposite end where like schools are totalitarian enclaves, which is basically what they are. And that's the problem that we have here. That's why I support homeschooling, because if you have decent parents who actually do care about their kids, they should be allowed to take them out of that environment.
So I understand the arguments, but I would say it's important for a nation to have the same foundation of education in the country. So I can understand why you would want to teach your own kids, but how do you make certain that they are taught the same? That you have a foundation of a knowledge that is the same, so you have a foundation that you can agree on in some way,
Mm-hmm.
because effects are different for each child. Well, it will be difficult to find any form of coherency in the state, I think. Um, but I can see why your why parents would want to educate themselves if teachers are political in the classroom setting. That's fucking insane. And I'll just say the formalities, the non-formalities, is a thing of Northern Europe, and I think you have last names. You use last names in classrooms in other European countries like Germany, I think.
Yeah, so as in terms of the issue of regulation, now we have a federal system, so each state does things differently. It's not really This is not really controlled at a federal level, but there are different states that have different regulations. Like I think that there are states that like I don't have all the info like on me at the moment, but there are states where you have to make sure that you're teaching your kids like certain subjects, and you have to abide by certain standards. Common Core would be like English or reading comprehension in general, math subjects, science subjects. I think maybe a foreign language, which is usually Spanish because we border a bunch of Spanish-speaking countries. I mean, we have something called Common Core where it's like you have certain subjects that you have to teach your kids, and so the government's like you can be the teacher of your child, but you have to abide by these standards. Some states have completely unregulated homeschooling. Other states have regulations where it's like you can do it, but within these parameters. And I think there are some states like maybe California where the practice is completely illegal, and they say, yeah, no, they have to go to either a public school or a private school. I do support like homeschooling because sometimes it's necessary. Like if let's say you have a family that lives in a dangerous neighborhood, you would not want them going to school where their classmates might stab them and the teachers don't give a shit, or even worse, they take the side of the aggressor. So I can understand using that as a way of protecting one's children from danger or harm or bullying or whatever the case might be. And I would say, yes, they should be allowed to do that for their children, but they should also have to abide by certain parameters. Okay, when they reach this age, you have to teach them these subjects, and you gotta, like, and maybe, like, the government checks on them to make sure that they're, teaching them the things that they need to be taught. I don't know exactly on hand exactly how that would be regulated, but ideally, because there are some parents that would challenge their children a lot more than school would. Because, like, I learned a lot more about history, like World War One, on my own than I ever did in the classroom. Because in the classroom, they teach you, like, Germany versus France. And, of course, they throw in American involvement, even though the United States got involved really late. And the United States was not exactly a main combatant in World War One. But the stuff that I was interested in was, like, Bulgaria versus Serbia and Greece. Like no one really, when people learn about World War One, nobody really cares about Bulgaria, but they were one of the four countries that made up the Central Powers. And I was looking at a map of like what country was on what side. And I'm like, damn, the Central Powers got utterly fucked in World War One. It's basically the planet Earth versus four countries. But I went to public school, so that obviously, the whole homeschooling thing doesn't really apply to me. The biggest, one other really big element that people say, oh well, homeschooling's bad because kids don't get socialized, they don't learn how to interact with people. Bro, I went to public schools. I was a social disaster. I was just not only I wasn't just socially awkward, but I didn't do a great job at socializing with the people that I went to school with, and I didn't really remain friends with the few people that I actually was on good terms with in school. So, like a lot of the arguments that people use against homeschooling in terms of the social aspect, I don't find very convincing. But then again, like I was never homeschooled or anything. And Hunter Avalone is a YouTuber who was homeschooled, and he seems to be a lot more adept in social situations than I am. So that would be like my argument on that front, even though that's not something that you brought up. But I wanted to address.
I was thinking about it, but to be fair, but I didn't mention it.
Because I know that that's a big argument that people like to use. It's like, oh, well, school teaches you how to interact with people. I did eventually learn how to interact with people, but it wasn't because of. It wasn't necessarily me learning from experiences, including traumatic experiences. It was me, like, actually, like, being told things, like, years later as an adult, and me, like, honestly using the internet to search for answers that I had questions to. That's the nice thing about growing up with the internet is like you have this like repertoire of information and you can learn from people and stuff like that. But when I was in like from elementary school to high school, like really I was socially awkward, and that never changed. I was not great at interacting with people. That never changed. Uh, my classmates would never tell me like why they were pissed off at me. My teachers didn't. My teachers always had this attitude of you should have known better, even though you're a child who's learning all this shit for the first time. Because even though they're trusted with the position of teaching children, they were attracted to the position more just so that they could have power over children, not because that they actually wanted to help people. Not every teacher was like that. There were teachers that actually did care about doing their job well, but again, it's a position that attracts nasty people, kind of like how the position of being a priest attracts child molesters.
A bit harsh.
It is but that is, I mean, it is kind of the truth, because like the position of teacher or priest attracts like really bad people, kind of the way like the position of being a police officer will attract people who want to have violent power that they can use over people. Like if you like, there are different people that opt to become police officers. The people that go into the profession because they want to help people, because they want to protect society, like those ones are the good or end up being the good ones. But then you have people who are like, oh yeah, I gotta have a gun where I can shoot people, or I could beat the crap out of people, and I've got a whole like gang of people defending me. Sign me up. Those are the ones that you got to watch out for. And our police departments, a lot of them are trying to like weed out the latter group, but the ones that have gone bad completely are not. So,
do you have a lot of violence in society? Because earlier you also said homeschooling is great because people in bad neighborhoods could stay at home instead of going to school because they are a danger. Or right now you also refer to violence. Uh, is there a lot of violence in society? Because as a Dane, it's really frightening, really grim to hear that violence is such a big part of society that people have to fear in their daily life.
So, I mean, I do think that to a degree there is an element of there's something called mean world syndrome where the media finding it more profitable and more attention grabbing to report on like every single crime that happens. It gives you the impression that the United States and is like a complete war zone all the time. Like occasionally you do see or experience violence, but it's not as commonplace as the media might make you think that it is. If anything, I would say, and like I do think that people focus more when it happens on the in the United States, but like a lot of countries in the Americas have have problems like this, like Mexico, like people. I feel sometimes people put the United States in a different category as from countries like Mexico and Brazil. Maybe because we're full of white people and we speak English, and so people.
Or maybe because you're so damn rich. You're so damn rich that you shouldn't have a society which is so unequal that it creates all this violence. You should have enough resources to help your citizens away from this violence and violent rhetoric at some points.
So basically, my answer to that is how wealthy a country in general, or the people running the country, how wealthy the people running the country is, does not actually change whether or not we have social services or how peaceful or violent the country is. Because, yes, like countries like Mexico and Brazil have a lot of violence the way the United States does. But when you think of a wealthy country, like Uruguay and Vietnam are not particularly wealthy, but they actually care for their the governments of those countries care for their citizens a hell of a lot more than the United States, Mexico, or Brazil do. So I think it's got more to do with culture, and it's got more to do with the government system that you have in place. Like Vietnam and Uruguay, like Vietnam, these countries are poor as shit, and the quality of life in those countries is actually pretty good because they have their system is not dysfunctional like ours is. Now Vietnam has a lot of corruption problems, and they do have like they have a kind of somewhat tyrannical government, but I do think that like people who are not out to rabble rouse in countries like that, at least in Vietnam specifically, like a lot of people can live a decent life there. And from what I hear, violence is not super common out in the streets. Although people who join the military there, they like an initiation ritual is that all the people that have been there will beat the shit out of new people, which is only avoided by having government connections to scare people away from doing that. I do think that that is a problem that they experience, and that's what I've seen from people who post that they are from Vietnam and they had been in the military and experienced that when they first went in. But then you get a country like Uruguay in South America. They're a much poorer country than the United States is, and they take care of their citizens a lot better. So I do think that how wealthy your country is doesn't actually affect whether or not you have a culture where people actually do give a shit about each other or having a government that works for its citizens. The only thing that Uruguay does that I'm not super fond of is they have some of the stiffest penalties for failing to vote in an election, but I don't know. I mean, I guess like that can be good to get people to vote, but if that were attempted to be implemented in the United States, I could see how it would be a disaster.
It would be. Well, Uruguay would the people of Uruguay would protest. They would stop all production in the country if they were treated as those in the US. They wouldn't accept the level of corruption at the top, the greediness. So you would simply not have the same regime in place if they're treated as the common man in the US. But the US does have many commodities, a lot of wealth in goods. Americans, in my opinion, as a European, I think that you really do love the you really love to have physical things. You like to have three, four, five televisions. You like to have two big cars and so on and so on. And you want it to be very affordable, and you prioritize those things instead of having a social welfare net. You would rather have the individualistic approach in wealth, where wealth is distributed to the, individual instead of combining the wealth in order to create uh, these kind of social security nets, which helps everybody. So your wealth is the American dream is that you can create your own happiness and your own wealth if you work hard enough. You don't have to have a big government. A small government will suffice, and no one will be there to catch you because it's not needed. It's your own abilities which will make you successful.
That even we are rather, at least comparatively, wealthy country. A lot of Americans value the simple things in life, which is true. I think that this might sound strange, but there's one thing that Americans and Russian citizens have in common is that a lot of us are apolitical and just kind of want to live a comfortable life. And this is based on both observation. It's based on what I've read in Hedrick Smith's book, The Russians, which was a book about the Soviet Union written back in the 70s. A lot of Americans want to live a comfortable life, and because political involvement is something that a lot of people who are in politics encourages. It's not something like a lot of Americans just stay out of it because there is a general attitude of you don't talk about politics and religion in polite company because people do get very passionate about it, and in some cases people get violent over it. So a lot of Americans are terrified to even touch politics and religion, but at the same time, like, voting is your ability to decide, what kind of laws and what kind of people who are writing those laws that you're living under. And at least in Russia, like, they don't really give a shit because they have zero control of who wins elections because their system is much more corrupt and sinister than ours is. Here, like, we do have a lot of voting problems and irregularities, but it seems like there's people have a little bit more control over who wins elections. Like, you can win an election and you can your vote does have an effect. It's just the money in politics and whether or not you have name recognition are confounding variables. I think I'm from a lower middle class family, so we have like one main television that my parents, like, I live with my parents still. There's the main television that my father bought and he basically has control over. I do have a television in my bedroom, but it was the old family television, and I was using it to play PlayStation 2 games. And my parents have a Commodore 64 screen in their bedroom that they're using as a television. They have it hooked up to an antenna and whatnot, and they sometimes use that as a television, but the screen is smaller than a modern computer screen, so it's not like a TV. So yeah, we do have multiple TVs, but we're not like a particularly wealthy family. And maybe like if I were to visit like say the Philippines, I would be fabulously wealthy, but here in the United States, everything costs a lot more, so by American standards, I'm a pauper.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very very rich. Uh, Not really. No. Um, let's turn the discussion to something else.
If you need me to give you an idea, there's something that we did touch up on in Reddit that I did want to go more into detail about, and that has to do with crime, the penal, like specifically the penal system. Because one thing that was brought up is that there is the difference between the American system and like the Nordic systems. How the Nordic systems focus more on rehabilitation, and the perception seems to be is that a lot of American jurisdictions focus more on punishment. I wanted to go more into all of that if you'd be interested.
Yeah, fine, fine. That's fine now. So, is there anything you want to know?
So, if I'm not mistaken, like it's a lot of European countries in general. Well, I know that the Nordic systems focus more on rehabilitating people, and the United Kingdom seems to also have their version of that. So the thing that got all that to be kind of controversial was back in 2011. You had that mass shooter Anders Behring Breivik who went and like killed like 70 something children, which and when he was thrown in prison, he was put into the system where they were rehabilitating him. And Anders Breivik, the reason why he had this like outburst was, I think he was trying to spark debate on all of this, or he was like trying to screw with the Norwegian prison system by like saying like he like there were pictures of his cells and the courtyard that he had to himself. It's like he has a cell that's like a dorm room, or like he had multiple rooms, and he had a courtyard all to himself. And he's like, it's torture that I you only gave me a PlayStation 1 and not the latest one. And because he knows that in the United States, like, we treat prisoners who commit heinous crimes very severely. Well, it's not just the United States. Most countries in the world actually treat their prisoners pretty brutally, and that it's only really in Europe where you guys actually do care about giving them a relatively decent quality of life, and you actually try to rehabilitate people.
So, in regards to Breivik, he he's not coming out. He's not getting out of prison, at least not until he's so old that
That
he
he
can
can't
barely
physically
walk out of.
when
He's the sentence he's gotten is a sentence for until he's not a danger to society anymore, and he's not getting out.
so
It
I
would
think
be it would be a huge it would be a huge deal if he got out.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think he was in his 30s when he did that shooting all those years ago, and he was given 21 years. But so, like, if he was only doing those 21 years, he'd be in his 50s. Like a person in their like a man in their 50s is still capable of violence. It's not like they're in their 70s or 80s where they would be so like decrepit and feeble that they would be incapable of like even picking up a firearm, let alone using it effectively. Though I've read people say that in Norway they have a system where they have like like every 2 years they review like prisoners, and they psychologically evaluate them to see whether or not they're still a danger to society. And if they suspect that that individual hasn't actually like changed for the better in a substantial way, then they extend their prison sentence by 2 more years. And that the idea is like he'll probably be in there for the rest of his life, unless if he figures out how to trick the prison guards or whatever into thinking that he's changed for the better. And I guess that might be better than our system, where we just give people only a few years or a lot of time, and if they just don't commit crimes while they're locked up, then that's all the time that they have to worry about. Now, I'm not like super well versed as to whether or not we have like a review where people in prison get reviewed, but it doesn't seem to be working because like I used to work a job where I was working on cars, and that kind of profession attracts a lot of very sketchy people. And I had this one sociopath of a coworker who was notorious for stealing from people. Now, fortunately, he never stole from me, but I probably because I just made it very inconvenient for him to do it. But he stole tools from the mechanic. He would steal shit from different stores. The thing that he ended up getting busted for was he was stealing items from one AutoZone and he was selling it to another to make money. And finally, the company was like logging everything, and they got the police to chase him down. They found him in a different state, so that made it a federal crime because he did it across state lines. I think he did like a year in prison, and then they just let him out, and then he just goes back to committing that exact same crime over again. And he's got a daughter to take care of. He's a single dad, but he apparently doesn't care enough about his kid that he wouldn't go back to prison. Like, he just doesn't seem to give a shit, and he got caught stealing more stuff from the company that was stupid enough to hire him back, and then he went back to jail, and then the government releases him from jail, and now he's working at some other company because the company in question just finally wisened up to stop rehiring him. And my attitude is like, the problem is that it seems like the American government and a lot of Americans don't think that stealing from people is that big of a deal. But he would be an example of somebody that I think should just be locked up and never let out because he shows a complete lack of remorse for the crimes that he commits. He steals from people not because he actually needs the stuff that he's stealing, but just because he has this mentality of, if I can steal from you, if it's easy for me to do, then you deserve whatever harm comes your way. And it's like, yeah, someone who's like that, who possibly like cries crocodile tears in order to get back out and constantly gets back locked back in, someone like that is probably just not curable, and you should just either lock them up or execute them because they've made it very clear that they're not interested in changing. They might like pretend that they've changed, or they might like cry crocodile tears to get you to farm sympathy so that way they'd be let out to the public again. But this is someone that has no desire to change their behavior. And one thing I'm not sure if I mentioned is he also loved getting into fights. He loved violence. When I first started working with him, he kept trying to do things to provoke me, like borrowing my tools without asking and just being very rude in general. Until finally, like, he realizing that wasn't working, he tried directly threatening me. I told the manager, and from that point on, he never gave me any trouble again. But I've been told by somebody who still works at that company, when the company let him back after he was let out of jail, he got into fights with a whole bunch of people. He started a bunch of fights with people before the company finally fired him again for stealing from the company. It seems like this country, the United States, just doesn't really treat theft all that seriously, unless, of course, someone steals from a wealthy person or the government or something. Then they really care. Then it's now they're going to take it seriously. But stealing from poor people, they don't give a shit. I think that the way we look at crime in that light is dysfunctional, because I actually am more sympathetic to somebody who either severely physically hurts somebody or kills somebody because the other person like provoked them really bad, like maybe they were destroying their property and they just like lost control in the heat of the moment. I would be more sympathetic to rehabilitating somebody like that. But the kind of like career criminal that I mentioned I don't think you can rehabilitate somebody like that no matter what you do, because there's no effort on their side to change for the better. So I don't know what your opinion as a Danish person would be on that. Like I don't have that much knowledge on the Nordic systems, how you actually rehabilitate people, and whether or not you deal with individuals like that who are, as I said, sociopaths.
Well, if he's a sociopath, he should be locked up in a mental institution instead. So you can also get a treatment, and incarcerated to treatment. So some people will be forced to be locked up in a facility where you are either locked up or you are fucked up by medicine. Um, and some people are just not redeemable, and they will get increasingly higher and higher uh, um, sentencings, and that's their punishment. In Denmark, it's 33%, I think it is, with of criminals who've been incarcerated that recommits crime at least 2 years after uh, their them getting free. In the US, I think I read it was 67%. So you you can see, or at least what I understand of it, is that if you try to rehabilitate them, you will get a bigger part of these criminals or first offenders or second offenders, which will not commit crimes again, than in the US, where I know I'm simplifying by saying US because you have different states and different rules. But in general, I would say you try to incarcerate in order to punish them for their crimes. We also punish them, but it's more in order to rehabilitate them to come back to society. And when you talk about the prisons of the Nordics versus the United States, so the punishment is not that you have to live in inhumane conditions. It is that you don't have any freedoms left. You're not free to choose when you're locked up. You're not free to choose when you go out. You're not free to choose anything yourself. That's up to the state or the jail or the prison or what we should call it. Your freedom uh, has been taken away. You don't have to treat people. You don't have to treat people you don't like because they've not done something horrible by treating them inhumane, because it says something about your society as well, that you are in the case of Breivik, I wouldn't be sad if he had been killed, that he had been executed. But I'm not for state mandated executions, because there's a risk. There's a risk that just one person is executed by mistake, and if the state decides to execute one by mistake, it's much worse than having 10 who have to live in prison for the rest of their days. I wouldn't want the state to be guilty of killing someone. I really wouldn't. So that's really how the most common thought is about prison and sentencing in the Nordics. But of course, you have people who are unredeemable, and they will get harder and harder sentencings, and they will live in prison, go out in and out of prisons every day, and we just have to accept that as part of society, that we have laws and some are willing to break our laws and then they will face consequences of their actions. But we don't have to to lock them up for the rest of their days if they are willing to change.
Yeah, so I pretty much agree with that. I mean, it's not just the United States that. Well, here's the thing: is in the United States we actually kind of have a mixed system. We have a mixture of different like approaches. I think most countries in the world take a more punitive approach. Like Mexico is an example of a country where it's like you think that people that like yeah people do get tortured in American prisons either by the guards or by inmates depending on which prison what part of the country it happens to be in because different states have different standards and what kind of stuff that they'll tolerate and it also varies by the prison but in like Mexican prisons like someone who I saw like there's a YouTuber named Fresh Out. He also goes by Big Herc 916, and he talks to people like, and not just in the United States, but even people in other countries like Mexico, about what their experiences in prison was like. Like there was a case where I don't know if it was a rapist or a child molester getting like raped by the other inmates with a broomstick, and like that kind of stuff is very common in like some of these third world countries. So like punitive systems or systems where the government just does not care about what happens to inmates is the norm in most countries across the world. It seems to mostly really just be European countries where you're actually trying to fix people and make them functional members of society again, so you don't have a bloated system that's like ready to explode like a ticking time bomb. So when
So
it comes to
so so yeah, in my darkest hours, in my darkest hours, when I hear about child molesters and so on, I also want them to suffer, really suffer. But it shouldn't be my frustrations or my anger which is deciding whether we should treat them as human beings, even though they have done
horrible
heinous
things.
crimes.
Well, the thing is that the problem there is that the people who um, are willing to allow their feelings to get the better of them are the people that are actually making the decision as to whether or not they do get any attempt at rehabilitation or whatever. Now, I will admit, I'm not perfect. I have been emotionally compromised before. Like, when I first heard about that case in the United Kingdom where you had those two 10-year-olds that, like, raped and murdered a 3-year-old toddler, like, I was like, yeah, fuck these guys. Like, not literally, but, like, obviously, like, these two deserve to burn in hell. Um, they got they got put into a rehabilitation system in the United Kingdom, and the British government tried releasing them out into the public with a pseudonym and in a different part of the country. Uh, Robert Thompson, who was, I think, a psychopath, he actually did manage to reintegrate into society because you don't hear about him, but the other one, John Venables, he kept getting in trouble with the law, either because he kept he would get drunk and reveal to people who he was while drunk, or the cops would throw him back in jail because he had apparently child porn on his computer. So, like when he murdered and sexually assaulted the 3-year-old child, apparently it's because John Venables was a chomo at heart, and that never changed as he got older. And the police kept giving him new pseudonyms and keep releasing him out into the public in different parts of the country. This kept going back and forth. He kept getting thrown in prison for the exact same crime. So the British system didn't seem to fix what was fundamentally wrong with him. Until finally John Venables himself, after getting thrown in prison for having CP on his computer multiple times, eventually finally John Venables is like, alright, you know something, I can't seem to behave in society. I'm just going to opt to stay in solitary confinement because I can't control myself. And the British government's no, we'll let you back out again. And it's like, you guys are kind of dropping, like, the British are dropping the ball in terms of how to do rehabilitation. They're doing it wrong. On the other hand, in the United States, yeah, like there was a general attitude. I think it's more with older generations that want to see like retribution. They have a sadistic desire to punish people. Now, my reason for wanting to lock people up, like the guy that I mentioned that I used to work with, the reason why I want him either locked up or executed is not because I want to punish him, even though when he and I got into it when I used to work there, like yeah, I did want to see him punished. But my reason now is not that I want him punished. I want him to not be a threat to society. Him attacking people and stealing from people is harming like other people, including me at a time. So my motivation is incapacitation, making it so that they physically cannot harm people. Now, in his case, we know that he's the criminal, and he seemed to be proud of the stuff that he was doing that was wrong. So it's like, just get rid of him. But as a general policy, where there have been cases of people being wrongfully executed, I do think that like they should be imprisoned just so they cannot physically harm people. But the problem with American prison systems is it's not like they're being put into a cell all by themselves, which is what solitary confinement is. They are put in like a dorm room, a really shitty dorm room made out of concrete, but it is basically a dorm with like a little cafeteria and everything. They're put in a dorm room with like bedrooms that have like several bunk beds. You have inmates and they're all living together and they're all like roommates. And the problem is sometimes you'll have either people who are more vulnerable being mixed in with people who are really dangerous and who do hurt other people. And it's like, yeah, I think that there should be an option for like, we do have something called protective custody, and a lot of like child molesters and rapists go there. So the problem is that it's not like solitary confinement where people are by themselves. They put everybody with each other because it's just cheaper to do it that way. And I think that is a mistake. I do think that we should, try to rehabilitate people. There is a general attitude, more so with older generations, that it's like once a criminal, always a criminal. Especially with felonies, we have felony disenfranchisement, which I'm kind of on the fence about. But it does, the way we treat people who have been convicted of felonies, a lot of their civil liberties are completely stripped away, and the label of felon is like, it's a label that never leaves them, no matter what they do, no matter how much you rehabilitate them. Like, our government keeps that label on them forever, and that kind of discourages them to change for the better. But I actually worked with a lot of people who had previously been in jail. The ones that were in there for like drug charges, they actually did change for the better. They are really nice people. They've never harmed me. And they never had any desire to do the things that got them thrown in jail in the first place. But the kind of people who steal from people just because they see their victims is easy to take advantage of. In my experience, from what I've seen and experienced firsthand, those people have no desire to change for the better, and being released from prison is just, to them, is just an opportunity to hurt more people. Oh, they get thrown back in jail again? Because like the guy that I mentioned that I was working with, he had his own toolbox with tools. He lost $15,000 worth of tools, which I don't know what the conversion to whatever euros is. I think it's probably less because our money's not worth as much. But that is a lot of money to lose.
Ours is krona.
It's like
It's 350,000
he lost
Danish krona.
Yeah, he lost $15,000 worth of tools because when he got thrown in jail, the manager gave his stuff to this a pair of guys who worked at a nearby place. Like, they wanted his toolbox with all the tools inside of it, and so he just gave it away to them. It's like this idiot lost $15,000 worth of tools. He gets out of jail. He must have bought new tools to go back to working again. He commits more crime and he gets himself thrown back in jail. It's like, this idiot doesn't learn. I don't know if they're trying to rehabilitate him in jail. I mean, whether or not jails and prisons rehabilitate people all depends on which ones they go to. We do have a problem with private prisons and private jails in the country, which they're not interested in rehabilitation. They just want to extract as much money out of people as possible. And I think that that problem started with Ronald Reagan, but I think Bill Clinton uh, made that problem worse, and it's a problem that's never really disappeared in the country. There are a few.
But what I hear here when you're talking about crime like stealing and so on, it's you criticize Bill Clinton here, but as I remember, Bill Clinton had this three strikes and you are out policy. It was it was horrible, but that would solve your problem with stealing. That if you're doing a crime, convicted a third time, you're in for life.
Yeah, well,
It's a horrible policy because you end up discriminating on people who are in really bad situations, and they are able to be rehabilitated. So we have to. I know it's difficult for to accept that he's an asshole. He's a criminal that steals, but we have to accept that some people are assholes and they will get in and out of jail all the time. But
well,
you can't make laws just because of him. You are trying to legislate in order to make the best decision for the whole country, for all who are redeemable.
well,
I know it's very difficult for those who are the victims of crime because that's maybe one of the shortcomings to rehabilitation in Denmark. That is if you're convicted of a violent crime, beating someone up or something like that, you might not get a very tough sentencing,
well,
and that might be difficult for the victims to accept. But that's how the system is.
yeah. And when it comes to a lot of people think that violent crime should always be treated more seriously. Well, maybe not in Denmark, but here in the United States, like the general attitude is we should always treat violent crime more seriously than like
Same,
cases of like
same.
cases of people stealing and shit. I actually like when it comes to violence. To me, what matters is the context of what was going on. Was it a case of like someone like attacking somebody in a predatory fashion, or was it a case of like there was a fight that escalated and this person's not normally like a violent or aggressive person, but like they were either acting in self-defense and the judge was like, yeah, you used too much force, or like the other person was doing things like destroying their property and it just provoked the person, like they lost control. I'm more sympathetic to people who commit violent crime like in cases like that than I am to the kind of person that I was talking about earlier who I don't know if he was ever diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, but everything that I know about him leans in that direction. I know that like there is.
But shouldn't you have more sympathy for him if something's wrong with him mentally,
I do.
where
I sorry.
someone who commits a murder because of their feelings getting hurt or something like that, they are out of passion, then they are still managing their own, they should be able to manage their own anger
Yeah, but
in order to not commit a crime because they know that they shouldn't have done it. A sick person is sick, but a person who is mentally capable is in my mind more sick because they are willing to commit something which is heinous and they know it's heinous.
so are you talking about the person that you say
Well,
commits
I'm talking
murder?
about you're saying this thief guy.
Yeah.
You think that a crime of passion is more acceptable, or let's what we should call it. It's more acceptable than this guy who is committing thievery.
So the thievery guy, he knows that what he's doing, like from what I've seen, like he knows what he's doing is wrong. Like I used to work with him. I used to talk with him. He committed crimes like this because he saw his victims as chumps. And from his perspective, if he can take advantage of you, then you deserve to be taken advantage of. And this guy has been given like many second chances. He's in and out of jail. Now I don't know if jail actually like rehabilitates people. I kind of think it probably doesn't. But most people when they go to jail, they don't want to go back. He's got a daughter. He spent a shit ton of money on tools and shit. He lost a lot of, and like he keeps committing the same crime over and over. And people, and it's not like no one ever like told him this is a bad idea, but he just chooses to not listen. And it's not so much that I want to punish him. Again, it's not that I want to punish him. He simply shouldn't be able to go back to going around hurting people. That's the point that I'm making. Now, the case of the violent crimes that I use as an example, like if these are people that are not going around attacking people on a regular basis, maybe they should have a chance at rehabilitation to, I don't know, help them, have a, if not have a thicker skin or try to. Well, I don't know how you would actually rehabilitate those people because
you can't really.
What's up?
It's difficult to rehabilitate someone, at least in the first few years, who's done something so heinous as committing a murder, because you also have to. Yeah, okay.
But do you think, because here's the thing, if Norway is going to try to rehabilitate Anders Behring Breivik, don't you think that
They're not going to. They're not going to. He's not getting out.
So what's the point?
He has.
So
The point is he's sitting there. His punishment is sitting there rotting till he dies. He's not getting rehabilitated because until the day he's not a danger to society, and the state decides if he's a danger to society. If he's not a danger to society, he can get out, but he will be deemed as a danger to society until he's very old and he cannot hurt anybody.
So what's the point in giving him 2 cells and a courtyard all to himself when it could be cheaper to just give him a cell where it's just 1 room?
Because that's how we treat everybody who's a criminal in the Nordics. You have to treat them as human beings. We don't punish by treating them with less dignity than a human being. The punishment is that their freedom has been taken away.
So
you could say in regards to Breivik, it's the problem is he cannot sit with other cellmates because he's insane and he will be fucked up in jail by others. So he's in solitary confinement because he cannot be with anyone else.
So on that point, so in the United States, the reason why like each inmate doesn't like have their own cell with as many amenities or as much space to themselves, we actually just don't really have the room for it. I mean, I guess we could start building more prisons to fit more people because our prisons are overcrowded. Like, there's been pictures of like you'll have like you have the bunk beds, which are really shitty because our government doesn't really want to spend too much on all this stuff. But you have a lot of people sleeping in sleeping bags on the floor, like all over the place. Not just inside of the dorm rooms, but even out in the common areas in the pods because there's just not enough room to fit everybody. So it's not. I don't think it's more like the people that are in charge are like rubbing their hands together, saying like, the sweet sounds of suffering. It's more like they just don't feel like spending the money on making life less miserable for these people. It's like, okay, here's your room, here's your shitty bed, here's your tables to eat on, and here's your basic slop that counts as food. That'll keep you alive. And it's a lot worse in sub-Saharan African countries where you have prison cells, like you've got prisons that were built for 800 people, housing like 5,000 people, and like each cell is like wall to wall, and like people sleeping on the floor, and there's like no room. But they also don't. I don't think they build more prisons. Where it's like I think we do build more prisons. We have more of them, but we also have a pretty large population. Like we have one of the largest populations on planet Earth, so we have a lot more people to house. So we have
But
prison.
also one of the biggest population in jail. You have way too many people in jail for committing small offenses.
But here's the thing: is
So if yeah,
but, but
you go on.
well, the thing is, we do have people that do get rehabilitated. We do have people that do change for the better. A lot of the people that do change for the better are people in there for like drug offenses. I mean, because I'm speaking from experience. The people who actually did change for the better, who didn't go on to commit more crimes, were people that were in for drugs. They either were selling marijuana back when it was illegal, or they were caught using some of these drugs. They do their time and they get out, and they have no intention of going back and continuing to do stuff. In general, they're actually a lot of them are really nice people. And then you got people who, they you got people like the thief that I was talking about, who they just like to go around hurting people, and they've got no intention of stopping doing what they're doing. And I'm just saying, let's put somebody somewhere where they can't go around continuing to hurt people. And some people will say, well, then you're not really rehabilitating them. If they do get rehabilitated in prison, if there's an attempt, then I'm for that. Sure, why not? But it's like they shouldn't be in an environment where they can continue to hurt people. It's like if you have a pipe that's leaking in your house, like, yeah, you want to get a plumber, but in the meantime, you want to try to stop it from leaking. Like, I don't know.
Part of rehabilitating is also to respect them, to treat them as human beings, as citizens. We want to come back in society and be a part of society. If you treat them like lesser people, like dogs, you do not really facilitate that they improve, because they will see themselves. You will see themselves in their position in society as as they are lesser persons, and then they will just be lesser persons. They will commit crimes again because, hey, nobody gives a fuck about me. I'm not worth as much as the other Americans. I'm just sitting here in this shithole. I'm not respected as a person. I committed a crime, yes, but you didn't treat me as a human being.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that actually, because even though there is like that's the element of retribution in our not just in our system, but it's kind of an endemic of like the psyche of Americans in general, or at least a lot of Americans think that way. Like they're like, well, you're a criminal, so I have every right to treat you like garbage. Or if something bad happens to you in jail or prison, then it's because you deserve it. I do think that is helping fuel. That's pouring gasoline on the fire. But at the same, because like even though I did not like this guy when I was working with him, I was never actually mean to him, believe it or not. But I also didn't. I would lock up my tools and I would check and count what tools that I had. So I made it inconvenient for him to steal from me, and so he never did. Um, I basically try to make it so that I was not an easy target. So I do think that in my experience, what typically stops people like that from committing crime is not so much the severity of the punishment that they experience, but the likelihood that they're going to get caught. And in my experience, like they tend to not target people that are inconvenient targets, and that is part of the problem with people like that. The problem is that
Hardened criminals are like that. Yeah. That's true.
The yeah, and I do remember seeing that Jubilee video where you have police officers and former inmates, like they're talking to each other, and the former inmates talked about all the kind of abuses they experience in our prison system. And yeah, that is a problem in a lot of prisons in the United States that really interferes with any attempt to fix people for the better. The part of the problem is that there's no federal attempt. There's no attempt at the federal level to like control this problem across the entire country. So it's left up to the states, and you get states like Alabama and Louisiana where they see inmates as lesser than human, and because there was like I don't know if you've ever heard of this show. There's a show called 60 Days In, where you have like a it's a show where they show like people who are not like prisoners. They become inmates for about 60 days, and they live for about 60 days in American prisons, or actually no, it's usually county jails as inmates, and it shows like a lot of the stuff going on. And there was an incident between, I think all the guys that were actually involved in this were like real inmates, and this was in a prison. This was in a jail in Alabama, which is one of the more reactionary states in the United States. There was a case where you had this. There was a dorm room with like two or three inmates. There was a guy wearing a white shirt, and he was refusing to shower. He was stinking up the entire room, and the other inmates are getting pissed off about it. And so they get into a fight. The guy with the white shirt who refused to shower, he goes somewhere else, and then he comes back with his hand, in his pocket or in his shirt, like he had his hand in his pants, which is usually a sign that he's carrying a weapon. And so the other guys, one of them had a broom, and all this was happening in front of a correctional officer. There's a correctional officer behind a desk in the middle of the room, and he's watching it all go down, and he's refusing to do anything about it. The guy with the broom tried attacking the guy in the white shirt, but he hit he hit like a column that was in his way, and it broke the broom. And he tried running, but the guy in the white shirt caught up with him, pulled out a makeshift knife, and stabbed the guy with the broom several times. The guy with the broom, he survived, but he was badly wounded. The guy in the white shirt, he later on got moved to a different cell. There was a correctional officer standing right in front of everything that was going on, just refused to do anything refused to lift a finger to stop any of it from happening. And I think one of the contestants started yelling at the correctional officer for not trying, even attempting to stop it from happening, and the correctional officer just ignored him. It's just like, this is not rehabilitating anybody. And
No, but your penal system and your law enforcement system are also broken because of lack of education of the officers.
Well,
But I think that would be a discussion for another day.
yeah, I mean,
You were saying?
yeah, I mean, our system has. Yeah, I'm not defending the system that we have. It's definitely very broken. But part of the problem is that the people who can do something to put a stop to it just do not really care to. Now, I will say this though: if Americans like went out and protested and even like rioted the way they did when George Floyd was killed by a police officer, if they were having that kind of reaction over the abuses in our prison system, then maybe things would change for the better. But they will have protests which get really crazy all across the country if like a police officer kills or like gets violent with a black person. But when there's things like our healthcare system being messed up, when our electoral system has anti-democratic elements, when we have this problem with our prison systems, it seems like they just don't care as much about it. And I think that that's the reason why things don't change for the better.
You only get the system you deserve. If you don't want another system, you don't fight for another system. The system will never change. And I think you're right in Americans or the silent majority of Americans being a bit like Russians. They just don't care. That they would call themselves apolitical. But how can you be apolitical in society when everything is decided by politicians?
Oh yeah, this reminds me of a discussion that I had with a French person. So I'm in another server called I'm in another server in another community, and we were having a discussion with this French person. Now, I think French people care a lot about their own civil liberties and their own like political participation than Americans and Russians in general seem to. Because like this French person was saying like, oh, if there was like a restaurant that was selling like literal shit, then people would, they would reject it. They wouldn't eat there. They would be up in arms about it. And I was like telling the other Americans like, ooh, should we tell this guy? And they're like, yeah. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, a lot of Americans will just eat if it tastes good, then you could be feeding them like all kinds of weird chemicals. As long as it tastes good and it looks tasty, then they'll eat it because they just don't care.
It's sad.
Yeah, that's the mentality that a lot of Americans have. Now there are people that live in this country that do care about what they're putting in their body. They do care about where their money goes, but a lot of Americans, it seems like the thing that they pursue is like that they pursue that high. And I'm not like an angel in this regard. I am kind of guilty of that. I do eat snack food from time to time.
But that's not the point. The point is it's sad that you have politicians who know better, that could provide you with a, a better life, and they do not do that. They could provide you with food which has less chemicals because they know it's right for you, but they don't do it. That's a decision of that's their decision. And if you're fed, if you are used to eat high sugary foods and processed foods, well, that's just what you eat because that's what you've always eaten.
Yeah, I posted the picture in question in the VC chat of the discussion that I was talking about. I took a picture of it because it's just like this is just like it's just too on. This is just like a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The guy in question, Kaiser Reinhard von Lohengram, that's not his real name, obviously. Is he mentioned earlier in the discussion that he's French, and it's like he's saying like the same way it's easy to control over the market of a restaurant that sells shit as food with proper food, and I'm just like, yeah, well, Americans are not French. That's we, yeah. I mean,
Let's yeah.
No, I'll let you
Yeah,
finish.
you gone.
Like some people say that I'm just having a negative attitude, but it's like I mean I spent like 29 so far 28 years living in the United States. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've experienced a lot of stuff. I've talked to people that don't live in this country, and everything that I'm saying is just like an observation of everything that's going on and why it's going on. I mean, doesn't the stuff that I'm saying like make sense? Like why our country has so many problems that it does?
It does make sense. Oh, ooh,
Something happened?
I am back. I just made a mistake. Yo, it does make sense. But the U.S. is not all bad.
Oh
You
no.
have huge problems, but they can be solved. But you really need to start electing someone who really gives a damn instead of
Yeah.
just accepting what you get. And I'm not saying, oh, you have to
Have a
elect Democrats. You don't have to elect Democrats. you also have bad Democrats.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to really, really elect someone who you know fights for you and are not intimidated by uh, their party. But alas, your system is broken with money. So yeah, that's the problem today.
I mean, it's not like the worst country because like when a lot of people were like when Trump got elected the second time around, a lot of people were thinking maybe I should move to a different country. Not me specifically, but a lot of people were like looking around. It's like what do they have over there? And it's like the United States is not a utopia. We do have a lot of problems, but at the same
I
time,
lost. I just lost sound. So I think I have to wrap up now.
are you
I
able
have
to
to
hear
go
me?
to the toilet and then I'll be going here.
Are you able to hear me, or can you not?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you just fine. Although now I'm getting an echo again.
Yeah. That's because my headset died.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
yeah, we'll have to continue another day.
Okay, well, I would just like to say I really appreciate that you have been, very like cerebral and respectful because like a lot of Europeans that I've encountered on the internet, or at least self-described Europeans, just like have a frothing, like insane hatred of Americans in general, just because a bunch of idiots elected the Agent Orange, Agent Krasnov, back in the White House.
Remember, Reddit is not real life.
I have a feeling that a lot of Redditors are really just people in St. Petersburg posing as Americans and Europeans.
Yeah, but you also have idiots and people who are too far up their ass to understand that nothing really is black and white. There are nuances to everything, and you can't take a European perspective and just copy it to American context.
Yeah. Well,
It's
this is
very,
why.
very big.
Well, this is the reason why I want to talk to people that live outside the United States, because it's like if I've never even set foot outside the United States, I'm not going to have I'm not going to have the insight that I'm looking for, because I want to talk to people that live outside the United States and get their perspectives on things, and maybe I can, maybe I could share the insights that I have as somebody who's lived my entire life here.
Yeah, and perspective is important, and it's also important to really listen to others because we all make mistakes and we are never really at a point where we can say we know everything. Only idiots do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So
If you need to go,
thank you for the talk. It was interesting.
thank
Next time, I would like to talk about this Eurocentric thing you were talking about in your YouTube channel, and Eurocentrism, I think you call it, and you also gyro, and you also talk about female supremacism.
Oh
Would be
yeah,
interesting to talk about because I'm not sure I agree with you.
it's
That's
yeah. So like my politics, like I so my political YouTube channel, and my presence on the internet in general is I'm like one of those men's rights activists. So like that's the thing that I care about the most. But it's not like that's the only thing that I talk about. I talk about a variety of different political issues, and I don't consider myself to be like I've had a number of discussions with people. I'm not like a what they call a traditionalist conservative. I'm not somebody who I consider myself to be an egalitarian. I do want people to have equal rights, but the reason why I'm not labeling myself as that, the reason I label myself as a men's rights activist and I talk about the stuff that I talk about is it has to do with the injustices that I'm seeing and experiencing firsthand. So, but that's a discussion that will take hours by itself, and I know that you're losing battery and all. So, whenever whenever you're ready, I'll
That's
let you know.
fine.
So yeah, we could schedule another discussion, and that one I'm sure will be very interesting as well.
Fantastic. Great to speak with you.
Thank you. The pleasure's all mine. It was nice. It was nice talking with you.
You have a nice day.
Have a good one. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.